Humans have such amazing capability. We've actually landed somebody on the moon using less computing power than the first iPhone had. We've built monuments to our greatness throughout the ages that still stand today as a testament to who we are and what we are destined to become. Yet, no matter how remarkable we are, there are some aspects of humanity that make it seem as if we always take one step backwards for every 2 steps forward. Humans are tribal by nature. We feel an affinity to those we identify with. You may not know the person sitting next to you at a sporting event, but if they're wearing the same jersey as you, then it's that stranger in you versus anyone else in the opposing jersey. Now, while this example may be minor and usually harmless, it helps lay the foundation for darker, more serious issues we face like racism and sexism. At its core, these two isms seek to marginalize entire portions of society based on the belief that one gender or race is less than the other. So, being very much a nerd, I started asking myself, can we use technology to defeat the last vestiges of that dark side of humanity? And I think the answer may surprise you. However, before we can dive into the tech that can actually fix racism and sexism, we need to first explore the isms we face in order to create a fully effective solution. There is no doubt that the concepts of racism and sexism are complex issues. For example, in order to be a racist, you actually have to believe in race itself, a concept that has no theory in science, according to multiple leading geneticists in the field. But if we dive into true human understanding, we can boil down the driving factor behind racism and sexism into a simple concept. Isms lack empathy. Now think about this for a second. That which connects us, whether it's a sports team association or even our gender or racial identity, is our belief that those in our group are, at least in some way, walking in our shoes. When we do not even have this rudimentary emotional tie, we are forced to try and create one via perceived empathy. But here's the thing. Many of us cannot even attempt to make that connection. We either have so little exposure to people outside of our tribes that it's virtually impossible to relate, or we have a psychological condition known as alexithymia that prevents us from building our own emotional lexicon, which makes it virtually impossible to understand ourselves, let alone others. And this is no small condition either. It is estimated to affect roughly 15.5 million people in the United States alone. Taken to the nth degree, this situation can create a racist that doesn't understand that other cultures have the same thoughts, feelings, hopes, and dreams as their own, or a sexist that believes the other gender is inferior in some way and is therefore incapable. This is what we face. And if we can fix these isms, I firmly believe that we can kill off prejudice in a generation or two, and it's technology that will help us do it. So let's explore some of the major ways that we can combat racism and sexism. Facial recognition can fix racism. Now, here's the interesting thing about facial recognition. The mere fact we're developing the technology actually helps combat racism and sexism. And let me explain. Facial recognition in its current form is inherently biased. Research done by MIT shows that these systems currently favor white males, correctly predicting who they are with 99% accuracy. When these same systems are applied to women and minorities, the failure rate increases to 35%. Additionally, when the ACLU used a major facial recognition system to test all 535 members of the US Congress against a criminal mugshot database that didn't include their faces, the system identified 28 members of Congress as criminals, and feel free to insert your own joke right here. The problem stems from how these technologies have been developed. They are primarily created and taught by white males, which is rather obvious in the context of the accuracy rate. So how does this help us combat racism and sexism? It's rather simple. In order to create a more accurate facial recognition system, we have to include more women and minorities in the development of these systems. Now, this isn't a stretch in thinking either. The process for creating a new technology means that we have to look at all races and cultures and genders in order to make it more inclusive. In other words, the mere fact that we develop the technology actually makes our technological workforce more inclusive. Now, before we go on to the next technology that can help defeat prejudice, we need to understand where the pitfalls are in its current development. And so the question we need to ask is, Can we teach a machine to emote like a human? Artificial intelligence is excellent at solving problems, even complex mathematical ones. But where AI typically falls down in its ability to interpret emotions like a human. Think about it this way. When a robot has to kill, who should it kill? Let me put it another way. If the brakes of a driverless car give out, should that driverless car kill the 5 pedestrians in front of it or crash into the concrete barrier, killing the sole driver? How do we weigh this answer? Each human has their own interpretation of this tragic event, and we're all not of one mind. And we can compound this issue even further for a machine when we add more complex emotion-based variables. What if those 5 pedestrians are terminal cancer patients? What if they're all children? We can start to see the problem here. How do we, if we even can, come to a consensus as to this issue and then apply that to a machine that has no emotions, a machine that wouldn't feel bad about hitting kids with a car? The solution thus far has been to have these systems mimic our facial expressions, mannerisms, emotions as best we can. Now, for many of us, this mimicking can come across as anywhere from cute to downright creepy, depending on how realistic the robot is, but to a person with the before-mentioned lack of emotional awareness, this actually becomes an excellent tool for building empathy and emotional lexicon. Therefore, robots can actually help us identify emotions and build empathy. I'd like you to meet Now. Now is an artificial intelligence that can be programmed to emote, and is currently being used in research to help children with autism read emotions. So how does Now help us defeat racism and sexism? For that, let's look at the answers, or let's look at a recent study. 89 participants were chosen to play and interact with Now for about an hour or so. At the end of each session, each participant was asked to turn Now off, and here's where it gets interesting. 43 of the participants were subjected to begging and pleading by Now, who didn't want to be turned off because he was afraid of the dark, or he didn't want to die, or he was afraid he wouldn't be turned back on again in the future. Now, of these 43 participants, 13 flat out refused to turn off Now. They just couldn't do it. The other 30 did turn Now off, but it took them twice as long to turn him off when compared to the group that didn't hear the begging and pleading. So what does this tell us? If we can find common ground with a robot, we can find common ground with other humans. In your minds, apply this technology to a willing participant that holds racist or sexist views. Now our AI wouldn't cure this person of their prejudice, but by diving into the core of the issue here, on lack of empathy and emotional understanding, technology could help build an emotional lexicon for an otherwise biased person. The process of feeling commonality with another being, even a robot, starts to show that person that other people have intrinsic value as well. So where do we go from here? Clearly, technology isn't the be-all, end-all to racism and sexism, but by leveraging it, we can start to rid the world of these isms very quickly. With any technology or with any problem, the solution is almost always time and education. The faster and further we are able to disseminate this kind of information to those who need it, though may not recognize it, the more quickly we can wipe these isms out once and for all. Thank you.